Hey, hey, hey. What's up, everybody? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Forgive me for having to push that live back an hour. I had a little personal emergency I had to tend to, but we're good. We're here. We're here. Got a whole dog too. Where'd the dog go? Where you at? Oh, there you are. Never mind. Sorry, I didn't even mean to bother you. I'm on dog sitting duties, man. I had to go pick up a family member's dog and stuff. And oh my gosh, it's been a crazy day today. Let me see if I can get this Facebook stream on in here. Okay. All right, let me add this in. All right, so basically, shout out to everybody. I hope everybody's had a damn fantastic day today. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can bring up this message. Yeah, the Russia, yeah, I seen that. Hey, what's up, everybody in the chat? What's up, Dolly? Hey, Third Eye, what's up, Just My Five, Heaven Sent? Shout out to you. Today has been a very interesting day in the way of politics, between Russia and there's been a lot of people chiming in too. Shout out to Cardi B. She chimed in as well on this topic, and I'm actually quite glad that she's using her platform to speak on important topics like this. I heard they tried to mute her on the platform or something like that, but she came back and she said, no, that's really her. It's really her expressing her opinion on the whole matter. Hey, what's up, Gloria? Hey, Michael Phillips, hello to you. Good to have you here. So we are going to get updated here on this whole Ukraine-Russia situation, okay? In the last 24 hours, there's been a lot of things moving, a lot of players moving around. I see you, Heaven Sent. I see you. A lot of players moving around. Speaking of, Heaven Sent, have you came into the Discord yet? I'll hit you up. But there's been a lot of course, politicking going around today. And yesterday, the last few days actually, we were sitting here sort of watching this whole thing unfold with Russia and the Ukraine. And of course, we've seen that Putin recognized the sovereignty of two independent states, so to speak. I guess they would be considered countries at this point. But there was a very interesting little video clip that came through today during Putin's meeting with his National Security Council, at a public meeting with his National Security Council. And it's the guy who was speaking. Forgive me, I don't have his name, but I'll grab it here in a moment. The guy who was actually speaking at the podium, it was like he wasn't saying the things exactly the way Putin wanted him to say, whatever. Of course, again, this was a public meeting, and there's all sorts of plays going on here. There's all sorts of plays. While everybody has been talking about this whole Russia-Ukraine situation, Russia has continued to advance into eastern Ukraine. And they now have these two locations on the map, okay? The DPR and the LPR, right? He's now recognized as being sovereign places, which of course that was his first move to invade Ukraine anyway. But he now has these land masses that he can utilize and move his troops in. And we were talking about this the other day. And as of today, that's exactly what he has been doing. He has been moving troops deeper into eastern Ukraine. Biden's had something to say about this today. And probably the biggest news of the day today is that the Secretary of State, Blinken, okay, he has now pulled his meeting with Lavrov. And who could forget who Lavrov is, right? Lavrov is the same man that Donald Trump met his first day in the White House. Took that very public picture with him. And the Secretary of State is now saying that Putin's goal of reconstituting the Russian Empire or total neutrality of the countries that surround Russia, it's like, no, our meeting is off. Our meeting is off. So now it's almost like, okay, is the United States sort of pulling the plug on diplomacy here? I think that, again, as I've been saying this, Russia is probably one of the best at war games. And that's what this is. This is chess. He's playing war games and he's playing for keeps. He is absolutely playing for keeps. So there's been a couple of like maps, strategies that have sort of came out that I want to show you guys, because as you all know, there's over 100, I'm hearing up to 190,000 Russian troops that have essentially surrounded eastern Ukraine on the northern, eastern, and southern flanks that can, at any moment, if they decide to push in, I think it's best represented on map form. So y'all check this out for a second, and then we will definitely continue.
The Russian army has been given a peacekeeping mission, so-called, in East Ukraine. What to expect now? During the last 48 hours, many videos have appeared showing these troops. Now, if we stop this and look, you'll see that all the vehicles have a large Z applied in white paint. That's a recognition symbol for soldiers who may soon enter combat an enemy equipped with similar vehicles. How far will they go? The Russian army has moved a big proportion of its combat power, 70% according to some estimates, to the area around Ukraine, about 125 battalion tactical groups, up to 1,000 soldiers in each of those, plus supporting elements, taking them to around 175,000 soldiers. They're commanded by half a dozen higher headquarters in Crimea, bordering the separatist-held Donbass there, and just north, where a key concentration from the 1st Tank Army is centered, including those tanks we saw at the start, to Belarus. Russia now has many military options. It could send troops into breakaway Donetsk and Luhansk, as tonight's announcements suggest, or go further to batter the Ukrainian army. It could push beyond, and current dispositions suggest a double envelopment. Those two arms you see there from Crimea and the Belgorod area might be used to cut off much of eastern Ukraine. At the highest end of escalation would be the type of plan revealed by the UK Ministry of Defence last Friday, suggesting a drive to Kiev and indeed taking the whole of eastern Ukraine. Now, experts in Kiev doubt this. They feel that Russia's forces may be big, but there just aren't enough to occupy such a huge area or surround their capital, a city of 5 million. As for the trigger for this military action, President Putin hosted a public meeting of his Security Council today. There, he sounded the death knell for the Minsk Accords, the long-stalled peace process between Ukraine and the Russian separatists. And he delivered this a few hours later in a TV address.
Видим, что правящая в Киеве верхушка постоянно и публично заявляет о нежелании выполнять Минский комплекс мер по урегулированию конфликта. Не заинтересована в мирном решении. Напротив, пытается вновь организовать на Донбассе блицкриг, как это уже было в 2014 и 2015 годах. Чем закончились тогда эти авантюры, мы помним.
Well, what about the trigger for military intervention? There have been incidents in the Russian separatist areas that seem to be the very provocations that Western leaders warned about, from the alleged shelling of a border post in Russia. Ukraine says none of its artillery was within range, to this apparently graphic footage, which claimed to show a man who'd lost his leg in Ukrainian shelling, but who some observers have pointed out appears to already have a fixing for a prosthesis. Extraordinary goings on then, as Russia tries to shape public opinion for action. So how will President Putin's speech be regarded by its audience in Russia? Earlier, I spoke to Andrei Kortunov, Director General of the Russian International Affairs Council, over a fragile internet connection. Our apologies for that. I asked him whether tonight's speech was effectively a declaration of war.
Well, I wouldn't be that confident about that. And it's now up to the West to decide whether business as usual is still an option after this diplomatic recognition of the two breakaway republics in East Ukraine.
What would you say, listening to that speech, is his state of mind?
Well, first of all, I think that it is very personal. You know, he has some very strong personal feelings towards Ukraine. Clearly, it is disappointment. There is a lot of resentment there. And I think that he tries very hard to justify the decision that he has just made. It's not easy, but he tries to be as convincing as he possibly can. This speech was addressed primarily to the domestic audience. And of course, many people in Russia feel sympathetic to those who live in the Donetsk and Lugansk areas of Ukraine. The general perception is that life is really hard for these people. They have to exist in the situation of permanent instability. So I think that if the decision made by Putin can bring more order and more peace to the region, this is something that the Russian public would definitely support. Though, of course,
how many other people sort of feel like people are going to say whatever they have to say, especially if they're living local to that region, knowing that there's troops literally closing in on them, right? They're closing in on them as we speak. They're moving in closer and closer and closer to the capital of Ukraine, which is Kiev. If you have not heard yet, okay, there is a list that has been discovered. And this list has the names of journalists who cause a fluff, vloggers, bloggers, and other important people and people that have basically a voice located in the Ukraine. And it has been said that on the people that are named on this list have been identified for either execution or imprisonment in a internment camp. Sounds a lot like Nazism, doesn't it? But that was discovered Sunday. And so again, if you did not take note of what he was saying earlier, the very first thing he actually mentioned in this broadcast, the marks on the side of these vehicles. Again, these tanks and all of this military equipment, it's very similar looking to what the Ukraine would have. Of course, America has provided a lot of military equipment. A lot of money has flown into the Ukraine from America. And Russia has now spray painted these marks on their tanks because the tanks look similar to other military equipment that could possibly be in the field of battle. So they want to make sure that they're hitting the right, they're not hitting their own friendly fire, right? Look at the level of detail that Russia has already went to, okay? If you've seen the videos that have been pouring out the last couple of days, there is literally thousands of tanks, other military equipment that's rolling right on in. Not to mention the fact there's all sorts of really weird incidents that seem to be showing up on TV. Just as an example, a man who appeared to, it was almost like he was pretending that his leg was just blown off by some sort of a mortar shell or something. But when you actually looked at his leg, he was actually sitting there with a fitted prosthesis. There's equipment that you put on before, I guess, you roll your prosthesis up. And apparently he didn't remove that, lying. You know what it is. When you lie, you end up getting more lies and more lies and more lies, right? But Russia is known to play these sorts of games. It's called disinformation tactics, right? And it's very, very concerning, to say the very least. Not to mention the fact there has been shelling and other sort of military activity that's been going on. Bombs have been going off in eastern Ukraine, in this particular region too, the DPR. And they've been fighting there since 2014. And don't forget, that is the same location where MH17 was shot down by that Russian Buk missile. MH17 was a plane that was headed to Kuala Lumpur from Amsterdam. A lot of the people on that plane was Dutch. So the Dutch led that investigation, and it did not go very well, to say the least. Again, if you get an opportunity, you should go check out this. There's a playlist. You'll find it on Vice News called Russian Roulette. There's I can't remember the guy's name, the reporter's name, but he was there during all of that. He got a lot of footage right after the plane was actually shot down. Actually, a lot of the investigative footage was literally came from Vice News. It's kind of crazy. But you can kind of see the map, right? I mean, they have established troops all the way around, and where they want to go, where they want to be is right there where Kiev is. 5 million people live in Kiev. 5 million. So I'm paying particular attention to videos that are coming out, social media, especially Twitter. That seems to be typically, I know we like Instagram here in the States, but it's a lot of places. Twitter's their main source, okay? That's their main source of information. Biden spoke on this today, guys. It was kind of interesting what he said. But let's see. Now, before I even get to kind of looking at more of this footage, of course, right? Of course, the United States has issued sanctions, right, on Russia. Of course they have. I think that Putin expected that, to be honest with you. So
on Monday evening, President Putin
that.
gave a televised address. He also signed Russia's recognition of the independence of Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine and ordered troops into the territories. Within hours, unidentified military vehicles were filmed near them. And Vladimir Putin says any Russian troops will be peacekeeping, to which the US says this.
He calls them peacekeepers.
He does.
This is nonsense. We know what they really are.
All this has come after months of a Russian military buildup near to Ukraine.
Now, let me just pause this for a second and really look. If you pay really close attention to the geographical map, LPR, DPR. Remember when he annexed Crimea? By taking this eastern swath of land, this huge swath of land, look at the advantage it gives him geographically. Now, Dolly, with Russia, the creator of Ethereum is actually from Russia. So I would think they're more inclined to use ETH, but
Ukraine.
We'll
Back
see.
in mid-November, this was the warning from NATO.
In recent weeks, we have seen large and unusual concentrations of Russian forces close to Ukraine's borders.
Moscow said this was alarmist, but neither the troops nor the concerns went away. On the 8th of December, the Washington Post published this recent satellite image showing Russian deployments. It reported a US estimate of 70,000 troops close to the border. Russia didn't deny this, but in an address in late December, President Putin said this.
The strengthening of US and NATO military groupings on Russia's borders and the organization of large-scale military maneuvers are a serious cause for concern.
To this, we can add Putin's long-standing frustration that NATO has expanded further east. And by January, Russian troops were arriving in Belarus. It neighbors both Russia and Ukraine, and Moscow said its actions were about repelling external aggression. It talked of compromises too. But by February, this was the American assessment.
We're in a window when an invasion could begin at any time.
On the same day, Russia claimed our country is not going to attack anyone. But Russia's military activity continued. There were naval maneuvers in the Black Sea. This satellite image showed helicopter deployments close to the border. Another showed a new pontoon bridge in Belarus, less than 6 kilometers from Ukraine. At this time, Russia was also claiming it was pulling some troops out. It released these images to prove it, but NATO was unconvinced.
So far, we have not seen any sign of de-escalation on the ground.
By this point, the Americans were claiming there were 150,000 Russian troops in place, which brings us to this week, with Vladimir Putin talking of Ukraine as ancient Russian soil and ordering his into Ukraine. And while the West imposes new sanctions, he now considers his next move.
And Putin is all sorts of out of order on this. Okay, he really is. But at the same time, again, how much more business are we going to stick our noses in? I'm just saying, not everything that happens in the world should become the United States of America's problem. That's all I'm saying. Now, Antony Blinken, this man here, canceled his planned meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. He was scheduled to meet with him in Geneva this week. And he announced today that the meeting is now off. It's a little bit concerning for me. It's like, I would think you'd want to keep those diplomatic ties open as much as possible. Yes, Russia's going to do what they want to do, right? Regardless. But I'm just saying it's a little early, yeah, to be closing diplomatic ties. I know that America wants to be seen as fierce and strong, but again, Zelensky, where is your people at? Why is Zelensky? Why do we see more of American policymakers standing up at podiums, giving speeches, more than the leaders in Ukraine? Why are we doing this? It becomes a real sore spot, especially when there's over 10,000 families here in the United States of America who may have a family member that may have to deploy to the Baltics. Entire ships, entire platoons. Really? When I think about that geographical area, you know what I think of? I ain't even gonna lie to you. I think about cannibalism. I think about how poor that area is, the starvation that Stalin did to his own people when he was dictator, okay? They started cannibalizing each other. I think about the Ruskies, you know, with the scarf around them, you know, the women with the warts on their nose, okay? You know the look I'm referring to. But again, I don't see the Ukraine doing all this type of FaceTime and stuff like that. Now, I know Zelensky said that he would absolutely like to meet with Putin. That's great. But again, where is the Secretary of State for Ukraine at? Why does it hinder? Why does any sort of peace talks or anything hinder what the United States does? We're not even physically there. None of us, many of us, almost all of us, 99% of us will never, ever see this piece of land with our own two eyes, except for on TV until the day we die. Why are we putting more effort in than the leaders of the Ukraine? That's my problem with this. And y'all know I love my military, okay? And we have 10,000 soldiers already slated to go to the Baltics on this AKA NATO peacekeeping mission. Not feeling it. Not feeling it. Not feeling this at all. Now, if you're questioning yourself or asking yourself, is this the beginning of a Russian invasion? The invasion already started. You seen how Putin did that, right? He already invaded. He's in the Ukraine now. And now that he's rescued these he is not rescued, but he has basically said, yes, I recognize your sovereign country of the DPR and the LPR. All Putin's going to do is use it for what he needs. He doesn't really want that land. You must understand. He doesn't want the responsibility of all the people that live in that swath of land. He doesn't really want that land. He really doesn't. It is all chess. But if he can if he can recognize that they're sovereign, then he can use their land to bring his troops in, and it gets him hundreds of miles closer to Kiev. And that's his goal. Now, again, Biden's response to all of this today was to issue more sanctions. I think Russia's figured out how to get around sanctions at this point. There's been a lot of, I know sanctions do hurt. Now, let's not even get it twisted here. Sanctions do hurt, because when you really look at how sanctions get applied to some of these Russian businessmen and these oligarchs, like, even if they go to other countries that may have like an agreement with the United States, their money will get tied up. They'll hem their money up. There's all sorts of things like that happen, of course. But can I also throw something else out here too, since we're all talking about Russia flexing its might and everything right now? Don't forget about Syria. Don't forget about Bashar al-Assad and Syria, and how Russia has helped contribute to the mass murder of thousands of Syrian women and children. Multiple chemical gas attacks, okay, launched by Russian-made equipment, not to mention the story that we did on Russia's hands into the mining business in Africa, where Russia has been sending mercenaries into the Central African Republic, stealing minerals, because that is the most minerally rich place on earth. Russia's been sending mercenaries in there, number one, because they want to make money off those minerals. And these mercenaries have been slaughtering civilians in the Central African Republic. It's kind of amazing to me how much Russia sort of gets away with, right? But again, what would a war look like? It would be very, very nasty. There'd be a lot of people that would die. And the only thing that's stopping anyone from using nuclear weapons is the people themselves. Their own fate, I guess you could say. Because nuclear war is not going to help anybody, really, right? But it's scary because he does keep ratcheting up. He keeps ratcheting up and ratcheting and ratcheting. And I can honestly say, just sort of even just watching just this past week, Putin has been steamrolling over anybody's thoughts, anybody's opinions on the matter. He does not care. It's obvious that he has a plan. He's moving forward with this plan. And I'd like to show you this amazing video clip during his public meeting with his Security Council today. Very, very, very telling. Okay, very telling to say the least. Give me a sec. Give me a sec. I was like, oh, wowzers, wowzers, wowzers. And of course, during this meeting, the Kremlin warned that, quote, tensions are rising, end quote. It's like, you think? You think? Now, he had this unscheduled meeting with the Security Council. Actually, I'm sorry, it wasn't today. Well, it depends on what today is in Russia, to be honest with you. I'd have to look at a time zone clock. But he asked his subordinates to speak on their thoughts on this whole thing. And there was one person in particular. Give me a sec here. I'm trying to get this to load. And I've got it here. Just give me a sec. Come on. Hold that thought. That thought. May run up on that clip. I think I've seen it on Twitter or something like that, but you guys know how these websites are. They want to make a dime during times like this. So when they see certain searches being searched in the algorithm, they all of a sudden start throwing ads on there. It's just very effing annoying. Now, what was his name? Yes, Alexander Bortnikov and Nikolai Patrushev framed the whole issue in positive terms, so to speak, facing down those whose goal is the, quote, destruction of Russia, end quote. It's a very interesting article that sort of goes into the politics of Russia. But it was the way that Putin was talking to them, okay? He was cutting them off. He was being very curt with them. You could tell, it's like whatever it is, he's already made his mind up. I think it was all just for show, to be honest with you. I don't think there was any sort of sincere anything during that a so-called national security meeting with his security staff. I really don't. It was very obvious. And it was the way that he was cutting them off, the way that he was sort of forcing them to sort of answer the question. Very awkward, to say the least. But this is who Trump cozied up with. Old Putin. This is the whole mess. It really kind of makes me angry when I think about how Trump would easily stab America in its back if it meant getting an extra dime out of Russia, not to mention the fact that he has such crazy business practices and very, very suspect ass transactions, financial transactions, including one in which he sold a piece of property down in Florida for like $95 million, the most that a house is literally ever sold for. It's like and it was to a Russian oligarch. Okay. Oligarch meaning really rich guy in Russia. And this particular oligarch was going through a divorce. And it's pretty obvious that the husband, he would have rather threw the money. He would have rather threw the money into the house than give it to the wife in a divorce, basically.
Far beyond the steps we and our allies and partners implemented in 2014. And if Russia goes further with this invasion, we stand prepared.
Hey, everybody in the chat. Hey, Centel Bay.
Who in the Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare new so-called countries on territory that belong to his neighbors? This is a flagrant violation of international law and demands a firm response from the international community. So I'm going to begin to impose sanctions in response far beyond the steps we and our allies and partners implemented in 2014. And if Russia goes further with this invasion, we stand prepared to go further as with sanctions. Who in the Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare?
Stick to the teleprompter, Biden, if you don't mind. Stick to the teleprompter.
So today, I'm announcing the first tranche of sanctions to impose costs on Russia in response to their actions yesterday. These have been closely coordinated with our allies and partners and will continue to escalate sanctions if Russia escalates. As Russia contemplates its next move, we have our next move prepared as well. Russia will pay an even steeper price if it continues its aggression, including additional sanctions. The United States will continue to provide defensive assistance to Ukraine in the meantime, and will continue to reinforce and reassure our NATO allies. Today, in response to Russia's admission that it will not withdraw its forces from Belarus, I have authorized additional movements of U.S. forces and equipment Latvia and Lithuania. Let me be clear. These are totally defensive moves on our part.
No, listen, I'm not going to disagree with the man on that. Okay. I'm really not. My thing is, I don't see Zelensky out here doing all of this. So why is Biden? Shouldn't the very people who are being threatened to be invaded be out here putting all this FaceTime and doing all these press conferences, all these pressers and all that? It's like, again, America has a very bad habit of sticking its nose in other people's business. Okay. And I know we have interests there, but that's probably the best way, Lamina, it could be said. These people are playing chess with people's lives, and they don't care if some people lose them. It's really sad, but it's true. Let's just keep it honest here.
Russian Empire, which goes much further than only Ukraine, but also, other countries. Therefore, he made no secret of this. His aim is to restore Russian Empire, which goes much further than only Ukraine, but also, other countries. Therefore, he made no secret of this.
Now, if you really look at the moves that Putin has made, right, in the past, 10 years, 20 years, or whatever. Let's just start from when he annexed Crimea. We was looking at it on the map earlier. That was his start. That was the beginning of him so-called trying to unify the old Russia back together. Now, to kind of understand why Putin is even thinking this way, and I mean, he's got enough land as it is, right? Russia's a pretty damn big place. And he wants more and more and more. Let me just take more of some countries that haven't been a part of Russia since the USSR disintegrated. But you have to also know Putin and Putin's record and historical career. This is a man who comes from the old KGB days, the old USSR days, what we knew as USSR when I was a kid. To those who if you were born in the 90s, you don't know anything about the USSR. You've always known it as Russia. But the truth is, the map or the lines of these geographical locations have changed a few times over, I know, for the last 4 decades for me that I've been alive. So when you get an opportunity, if you really want to sort of understand maybe what Putin's mindset might be, there's a documentary out there. I'll drop a link to it here in the chat here momentarily. Just look and just ask yourself, what was Putin doing when the Berlin Wall fell, right? Or when the Berlin Wall came down? He was surrounded. He was literally surrounded in the location that he was in. I wouldn't say maybe his life was threatened, but there was definitely some serious possible violent incidents that could have arose. And he was sitting there literally burning all sorts of records and documents and all sorts of things that he knew that if they got into that location that he was in, there was important top secret documents he was kind of like sitting over at that time that he couldn't risk or would not risk getting into other people's hands. Imagine working there in a, almost like an offshoot office of your home office of Moscow. And you find out that your country is not the USSR anymore. You say, what? Everything changed for him. Everything. But what I find very interesting, probably through a lot of this, honestly, is a lot of the video footage that's coming out of Ukraine, and even from some of the Russian soldiers themselves, even though these Russian soldiers have been given decrees on their social media use. There were several instances a few years ago of Russian soldiers posting photos, selfies, and other photos. There was one incident I recall where they were posting these photos from a forest area. And the thing about posting photos is they're geotagged. So if you know what you're doing, you can actually pull a geographical location from where a photo was actually taken. And that's exactly what was done. And it was discovered that these particular Russian soldiers who posted these photos were in eastern Ukraine and should not have been. Now that he has recognized this DPR and this LPR, it gives him a huge swath of land to continue to encroach in on Ukraine. So it's not a question of, is Russia going to invade? They have already done so right under all of our noses, all in our faces, and we watched them do it. And then we yelled, oh, we're going to throw you some sanctions. That's basically what's happened.
Forces in the east, the Donbass region, for 8 years now. But despite that, the capital city of Kiev is relatively calm.
Amazing. So Market Rebellion, AP reported Philip Crowther covering the Ukraine conflict from Kiev in 6 different languages.
Hoy en Moscú con el presidente ruso Vladimir Putin y mañana aquí en Kiev con el presidente ucraniano Volodymyr Zelensky. Moscovo brandiu o anúncio de retirada da terça-feira como prova de que os temores da guerra foram fabricados por ocidente hostil liderado pelos Estados Unidos. À ce stade, la guerre semble probable.
Do you know that he's probably one of the highest? I know, I have no doubt that he could command a high salary. He could speak 6 languages. He can report under 6 languages. You know how many different countries that is he could potentially contract for? Now, the current administration's moves to restrict American oil and natural gas is one of the reasons Putin feels empowered to move on Ukraine now. I don't necessarily trust Fox News, I'll be honest with you. Okay. All right, on the streets of Donetsk, the biggest city in Ukraine's breakaway eastern region, some residents expressed joy and gratitude over Russia's decision to recognize their independence, but others were filled with foreboding for what might come next, and they should be. Putin didn't recognize their independence, okay? It's not exactly a celebration. Number one, that area is super poor, okay? A lot of poverty. It's just the truth. It's raggedy as hell. I'm just being honest. And that means that they're going to have to fall under a government that has been stationed there in the DPR and the LPR. So even though Russia's recognizing their independence, he didn't exactly say, well, you're now, he didn't annex them like he did Crimea. So the government there in DPR that has been created is going to have to support these people somehow, and I'm sure they'll have a lot of help from Moscow. Thumbs down.
also signed Russia's recognition of the independence of Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine and ordered troops into the territories. Within hours, unidentified military vehicles were filmed near them. And Vladimir Putin says any Russian troops will be peacekeeping, to which the US says this.
He calls them peacekeepers.
It's crazy,
This
right?
is nonsense.
Because he's calling them peacekeepers. We're saying, nah, you're sitting here invading Ukraine. I mean, right at everybody's face.
White House Principal Deputy National Security Advisor Jonathan Feiner. John,
But-
thank you so much for being with us at this critical time this morning. Is this, as you see it, as the White House sees it, an invasion?
Look, Brianna, we think this is, yes, the beginning of an invasion, Russia's latest invasion into Ukraine. And you are already seeing the beginning of our response that we have said will be swift and severe. Within minutes of President Putin speaking yesterday, we issued an executive order that effectively blocked all economic activity in the two provinces of Ukraine that Russia has now says belong to somebody else. And then overnight, in a very significant development that you just discussed, the Germans, in close coordination with us and in fulfillment of what the president said would transpire, have told the world that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline will not go forward. You're going to hear from us later today additional sanction steps that we're going to take that go directly at Russia in response to the egregious step that they took yesterday away from diplomacy and down the further path toward.
Can I just say something real quick to old fresh face here? Who is this? Jonathan Feiner. Never seen him a day in my life. Okay. Don't know who the hell he is. Honestly. Hey, what's up, Jager? Good to see you. Ain't seen you in a minute. Yeah. How they ran through Georgia. Yeah. Jonathan, you sure seem full of gusto. But I just hear broken record. That's all I hear, broken record. That's it.
Why would Russia need so much force to go after
the small area down here? Why would they have filled the region with so many different troops? Military experts who have looked at this say they believe it's because they want to have overwhelming power to support this peacekeeping mission in here and maybe to carry it a lot further. What kind of power are we talking about? Things like the fullback bomber capable of firing bunker-busting missiles in from across the border without even getting into Ukrainian airspace. Things like the Iskander-M short-range ballistic missile system. There are 36 of these just beyond the border, according to Ukraine, range 310 miles. That's almost half the distance across the country, again, without even crossing the border if they want to. And then, of course, they would have the tanks that they normally send in with their troops, their artillery all over the place. And then beyond that, they might even have a very active role to be played out here by the Black Sea Fleet and then other troops moving in from this area. In the end, one of the concerns that military strategists have for the West is that if they move into this area, Russia will not say merely that we're putting peacekeeping troops here, but that they might say, let's carve out a land bridge to Crimea, which we want anyway. And because of the danger, why don't we have a zone a little bit further out here just to say we're just keeping everyone apart so there won't be much fighting. And then maybe beyond that, the concern is, what if they say we're going to push all the way out here to the Dnieper River and say all of this is for Russia. And by the way, if the Ukraine army is in here resisting this, there's a real fear that what Russia might try to do is sweep in behind them and essentially isolate them and come up with a very, very diminished remainder of Ukraine and a very different looking map.
And y'all, that's really what this is all about. On some serious shit. Again, you know, if you look at maps on what the USSR used to look like, this ancient Russian soil that Putin, you know, has been talking about or whatnot, it would require that Putin has to take countries over in order to make that a so-called whole again. So I get it as far as the you know, the ultimate goal, but I just, it seems like we're making more of a stink about it than the Ukraine's own leadership. Why don't I see them all up and down my Twitter timeline? Where's all their videos? And look, every news agency in America has been talking about this. Ancient Russian soil.
В этой связи считаю необходимым принять уже давно назревшее решение. Незамедлительно признать независимость и суверенитет Донецкой Народной Республики и Луганской Народной Республики. Прошу Федеральное собрание Российской Федерации поддержать это решение, а затем и ратифицировать договоры о дружбе и взаимопомощи, кто захватил и удерживает власть в Киеве. Мы требуем незамедлительно прекратить боевые действия. В противном случае вся ответственность за возможное продолжение кровопролития будет целиком и полностью на совести правящего на территории Украины режима. В этой связи...
Insane. I was trying to see if I could find any footage of them moving their tanks. Moving their tanks and stuff in. Let me see if I can find, because that was a pretty amazing sight. There was thousands of tanks and other military vehicles that were literally lined up. But y'all check out a message from the president of Ukraine. Isn't that interesting? Okay.
І ми в цьому впевнені.
Let's see what he has to say.
Ми на своїй землі.
We are on our own land. We are not afraid of anything or anyone. That Russian spirit. We owe nothing to anyone, and we will not give anything to anyone.
Нічого і нікому не віддамо. І ми в цьому впевнені. Бо зараз лютий 2014 року, а лютий 2022 року. Інша країна,
Another country, another
інша
army,
армія,
one goal,
одна
peace,
мета – це мир.
Peace in
Мир в
Ukraine.
Україні. Ми на своїй землі. Ми нічого і нікого не боїмось. Ми ні.
He looks like a puppet. He looks like a puppet up there giving out a very rinsed and washed message that I'm pretty sure he had to get approval from the United States to even issue. Oh, amazing.
Tanks and military vehicles driving through eastern Ukraine early on Tuesday as members of the UN Security Council held an emergency meeting over fears of a Russian invasion. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas.
Well, guys, that's all there really is to say about this right now.
The following five Russian banks.
Hey, one thing I will say, I know many of you are sort of kind of getting familiar with politics right now because of all this, but if you ever wanted a real entertaining hour, okay, watch some of these British, their parliament, right? You watch their back and forth. I mean, they get really rude with each other over there. I'm just saying. It's actually quite entertaining.
Today, the UK is sanctioning the following five Russian banks. Rossiya, IS Bank, General Bank, Promzyaz Bank, and the Black Sea Bank. And we are sanctioning three very high net worth individuals, Gennady Timchenko, Boris Rottenberg, and Igor Rottenberg. Any assets they hold in the UK will be frozen. The individuals concerned will be banned from traveling here. And we will prohibit all UK individuals and entities from having any dealings with them. This is the first tranche, the first barrage of what we are prepared to do. And we hold further sanctions at readiness to be deployed alongside the United States and the European Union if the situation escalates still further. Today, The UK is sanctioning the following.
Money is the only language they understand, though, really, right? So it's kind of, they're going to basically take any assets that they have in anywhere in the UK, meaning not just England. The United Nations is comprised of, the EU is comprised of many different European countries, all individually governed, but yet they act as one. So taking their assets, meaning any homes, any bank accounts, anything with their name on it, basically. Cheesy ass music. Now this was uploaded. Let's see here. User reports 200 plus military vehicles drove through Brashkova, Russia. Got the GPS location right there. Can't take it, can't take it, can't take it.
Affairs for the United States National Security Council and a key witness in former President Trump's first impeachment. He testified about.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, y'all. I'm not feeling the way the stock market's moving either. Stocks definitely took a hit today. They've been taking stocks have been getting battered. Let's keep it real. We'll keep it funky. Stocks have been getting absolutely battered. And one of the concerns I have about that is, well, one sort of trend that I see is crypto leading stocks, price point, price action. So to me, that's a little concerning. I don't think crypto should not be leading stocks, but I also know that there's a lot of other things going on out here in the world that could absolutely be potentially helping, not to mention the current state of the world. But I do sort of see a trend there. Just keep your eye on it, in which, the price of Bitcoin has sort of been leading certain stocks' price action. And that just it shows a shift in the mindset of how people think in regards to how they are paying to get certain transactions done each day. Hey, Senorita Flowers, good to see you. We're just in here sort of getting up to speed on this whole Russia-Ukraine situation.
Results of the American elections. Imagine a candidate for president of the United States with suspicious and undisclosed ties to a foreign country. Imagine that foreign country was running a campaign to influence the results of the American election. It sounds like the rejected plot of a bad 1980s Cold War movie, but it might actually be true.
We know that Russia is trying to meddle in our election. The Department of Homeland Security and the Director of National Intelligence are confident that the Russian government directed recent hacks with the intention of interfering in our election process.
Donald Trump was reportedly briefed on Russia's efforts in mid-August, but has continued to deflect blame from Russia by trying to blame China or even a 400-pound hacker.
Maybe there is no hacking. It could also be China. It also could be somebody sitting on their bed that weighs 400 pounds, okay?
Russia has been propping up far-right parties in countries across Europe. Golden Dawn in Greece, AfD in Germany, Marine Le Pen's National Front in France. They're xenophobic, nationalist, anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, and they want to weaken the European Union. Russia has also been connected to the use of politically motivated hacks and strategic leaks as weapons of cyber warfare. So why would Russia and Putin have an interest in seeing Donald Trump win the election in November? It's because it's frightening how closely the foreign policy of Trump aligns with Putin's preferences. And concerning enough that the former acting director of the CIA said that Putin had recruited Trump as, quote,
an unwitting agent of the Russian Federation.
Russia's number one foreign policy goal is to weaken the European Union and NATO. Trump's called NATO obsolete.
I think NATO may be obsolete.
And suggested he wouldn't defend our NATO allies unless they pay up.
They got to pay.
Trump's even called for removing American troops stationed at our bases overseas, undermining our ability to stand up to Putin.
Trump denied Russia was in Ukraine.
He's not going to go into Ukraine.
Asserted that the people of Crimea prefer to be under Russian control.
The people of Crimea, from what I've heard, would rather be with Russia.
None of those are true, but they are the very same talking points that Vladimir Putin has used. Trump has expressed a willingness to lift the sanctions imposed on Russia for invading and occupying Crimea and eastern Ukraine, and said he, quote, would be looking at recognizing Russia's annexation of Crimea. And during the Republican National Convention, Trump's campaign staffers worked behind the scenes to make sure the party's platform weakened its stance on Russian intervention. Trump has surrounded himself with foreign policy advisors connected to Putin and Russia. Yes, the campaign chairman who appears to have received secret millions from the pro-Kremlin dictator resigned, but that's far from the end of the story. U.S. intelligence is reportedly investigating a Trump foreign policy advisor's alleged meetings with senior Russian officials. A former campaign advisor's PR firm was hired to help improve Putin's image in the United States. And then there's Michael Flynn. When Trump received his first classified intelligence briefing, it was Flynn who he brought in the room with him. Flynn has defended Russian intervention in Syria, where their airstrikes have killed more than 1,000 civilians. Flynn has praised Russia's influence in Europe and regularly appears on the Kremlin-backed propaganda outlet Russia Today. And how many former top spies in the U.S. military would surprise everyone by showing up at a black-tie gala in Moscow where Putin was the marquee speaker? The other half of the equation is that we have no idea how deep Donald Trump's financial interests and ties to Russia really go. Trump has a long history of engaging in Russia-related business deals. Over the years, he's tried numerous times to build a Trump Tower in Russia and has made deals with powerful Russian interests, from paying the USSR to sponsor Soviet bikers to race in the Tour de Trump, to a deal with Putin's favorite mixed martial arts fighter. He even tried to sell Trump vodka to the Russians. In 2006, Trump's partners on a project in Panama traveled to Moscow to sell condos to Russian investors. In 2008, Trump sold a mansion in Palm Beach to a Russian oligarch for $95 million. That's $54 million more than what Trump had paid for it just 4 years earlier. Maybe that's why, as Donald Jr. said, Russians make up a pretty disproportionate cross-section of a lot of our assets. We see a lot of money pouring in from Russia. In 2013, Trump brought his Miss Universe pageant to Moscow. Trump bragged that almost all of the oligarchs were there. One in particular, Russian billionaire Aras Agalarov, paid Trump millions to bring the pageant to Russia. Before the trip was over, Trump and Agalarov reportedly signed a deal to explore future real estate opportunities in Russia. And there are other Trump business relationships that should raise questions. Trump partnered with a company called the Bayrock Group on Trump Soho. The Bayrock Group was founded by a former Soviet-era commerce official. Another Bayrock executive named Felix Sater was the person Trump asked to escort his children around Moscow on a trip in 2006. Trump then named Sater a senior advisor in 2010.
Felix Sater, a twice-convicted felon, once tied to organized crime and a massive stock scam.
Another business partner on that Trump Soho project was the Sapir organization, whose founder, Tamir Sapir, was from the former Soviet Republic of Georgia, and whose family Trump has called great friends. The Sapir organization has long been rumored to be connected to organized crime. So I want to put a fine point on this. We have here a presidential candidate with deep ties to Russia, who won't disclose anything about them, who consistently echoes Russian talking points, who appears on Russia's propaganda network, who hires staff with Russian ties, who has defended Putin's actions, who has exhibited little regard for democracy or human rights. Music to Putin's ears. No one should feel comfortable if we get to November without far better answers about how much Trump has invested in Russia. And more importantly, how much Russia has invested in Trump. Because what we have right now is a Trump policy agenda that aligns far more closely with the interests of Vladimir Putin and Russia than the interests of the United States. Far from Trump's claim of America first, that's Russia first. And it's not someone who should be our next commander-in-chief.
Man, now that's an amazing piece done right there. Some would call that a hit piece, but it's all true, every bit of it. And I don't care how Republican you are, how right-wing you are, you can't deny that. You get to looking into those different allegations, you will end up down a whole rabbit hole. I know I did. I definitely did. But anyway, guys, I'm going to end this on the Crimes and Investigations channel. I may hang out a little bit here on the leakyou.com channel. But I'll catch you guys real soon over on Crimes and Investigations.
Is talking tough and taking a strong